At the stroke of the midnight hour, when the world sleeps, India will awake to life and freedom.
The India that Prime Minister Jawaharlal Nehru inherited was that of an economy battered by colonial exploitation and the horrors of partition.
Since 2016, 6 lakh Indians have given up their citizenship. India ranks number 1 when it comes to the migration of the rich and the educated.
सालों तक हम देखते आए, एक ही शब्द सुनते आए कि हमारे लोग पढ़ लिख करके तैयार होते हैं, विदेशों में चले जाते हैं और ब्रेन ड्रेन ये शब्द हम सुनते हैं.
The United States imports oil from Saudi Arabia, cars from Japan. So what do we import from India? We import people, really smart people.
Hi everybody, India is one of the biggest traders in the world economy. But do you know what is the most valuable resource we export? Most people might look at this stat and say that we export engineering goods and petroleum products. But in reality, the most valuable resources we export are the goddamn people of India. And you must have seen this every August when our friends proudly leave India and take out a 30 to 60 lakhs loan just to go and study in the US. And while most people might think it's not a big deal at all, I gotta tell you that when talented people like you leave India, it costs the Indian economy an insane $17 billion or 1.41 lakh crores every single year. You know how much money that is? It's more than 2 times the profit of Reliance Industries, 15 times the profit of Bajaj Finance and 28 times the profit of Adani Ports. This, my dear friends, is bleeding the Indian economy every single year. And as citizens of the country, this is one of the burning issues that we need to focus on if at all we want to become a $10 trillion economy. So in this special case study, let's do a deep dive and try to understand what is so terribly wrong about the design of Indian education that India has become a dalal of talent for the world. What are the fundamental reasons for the talent drain of India? And most importantly, as citizens of the country, where do we need to push the government to fix this brain drain problem of India? And if you find this case study valuable, please share this video with as many people as possible. But before we move on, we have a quick announcement from our friends Aman and Shradha from Apna College. People, while most colleges accept thousands of students during admissions, very few of them actually prepare the students to get quality internships or placements. This is the reason why the students who do not graduate from tier 1 colleges are often stuck with both lack of experience and lack of skills. In fact, this is the major reason for unemployment in India. This is the reason why my dear friends Aman and Shradha are building something absolutely incredible with Apna College. Apna College is a platform that helps students learn the most valuable development skills to get a job in the tech field. And their vision is to help every tier 2 and tier 3 college student get a high paying job in India. And now they are launching their course named Delta to teach you web development. This course will teach you both front-end and back-end development in depth at an affordable cost in just 4.5 months. So if you are somebody who could not get into a tier 1 college, this course could be a game changer for you. Because they don't just teach you web development and get you a certificate, but also help you get real-world experience with creating projects. And this will give your resume a great boost. Not just that, they also provide you with live sessions for resume building, live sessions on how to apply off campus and even interview preparation. Basically, they provide you with anything and everything you need to get you a high paying job. So if you want to get a great job by learning coding and web development, please enroll for the Delta batch from the link in the description. This is a story that dates back to 1947 India. This is when India just got an independence and the Brits had ruined the Indian civilization to such an extent that when they left us in such bad shape that we had 80% of our population struggling with poverty and the literacy rate in India was barely 12%. This is when Nehruji realized that if we as a country need to progress, we need to have a systematic approach to producing the best engineering and science talent in our country. Because without them, we cannot build dams, we cannot build power plants, and we cannot build manufacturing units. And without infrastructure, we could not have progressed as a nation. This is the reason why from the 1950s, Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru set out to establish a group of world-class engineering institutes in India. And these institutes are what we know today as the Indian Institute of Technology, or the IITs.
I want my country to be strong.
Nehru, India's first prime minister, created IIT 50 years ago just after independence. to train the scientists and engineers he knew the nation would need.
Nehru wanted all these young men and women to contribute to the success of India, and they are contributing to the success of India in some way, because today the respect for the Indian professional is much higher in the United States.
He never imagined India would be supplying brain power to the whole world.
Now, these IITs were coddled with all the resources that the government could possibly afford, starting from a huge campus to generous funding to even research grants. Everything was given to the IITs so that they can nurture the best engineering talent of India. And just like Nehruji envisioned, the IITs did produce some of the best engineering talents in the country. But the sad fact is that even then, a huge chunk of these IIT graduates left India to either study or work abroad. And as far as multiple news reports say, since 1953, nearly 25 to 30,000 IITians have settled in the US. The question is why? Well, as it turns out, while the number of super skilled IITians increased in India, the job market of India was far behind. As a result, even though IITians had the skill to contribute to India's growth, the business ecosystem in India was not capable enough to recruit them. So this begs the question, what the hell was wrong with India's business ecosystem? Well, the harsh truth behind this was nothing but India's extremely socialistic and in a way anti-capitalistic approach towards government policies. Now, because most people might think this to be yet another politically motivated statement, here are some of the many examples of how difficult it was to do business in India. For example, even though American companies like Coca-Cola and IBM were doing very healthy business in India, suddenly in 1977, as per the provisions of the Foreign Exchange Regulation Act brought by the Morarji Desai government, American companies were suddenly required to reduce their ownership stake of Indian operation, and they were asked to dilute their equity to a maximum of just 40%. Which means what? Your American company in India is very well established, and tomorrow the government comes and says, bro, listen, you got to give away 60% of your company to us and you can keep only 40%. This was ridiculous, isn't it? So guess what? Giant companies like Coca-Cola, IBM and 54 companies in total applied to leave India. Then from 1969 to 1991, we had something called the Monopolies and Restrictive Trade Practices Act. This was a law in India that defined a monopoly as a company or a group of companies that controlled more than 25% of the market share in one particular industry. Which means what? No matter how good you are, no matter how terrible your competition is, you cannot get more than 25% market share in a particular industry. And this is such a restrictive practice that had it been applied today, some of the most iconic companies like Asian Paints and Bajaj Finance would not have grown so much because they would be restricted at just 25% market share. By the way, even for giant companies like Tata, it was so difficult to do business that they could not start a watch company unless they partnered with the government. Which is why for Titan, Tata had to collaborate with the Tamil Nadu government to start the company. And during that time, there was only one player in the watch market, which was a very mediocre government-owned company called Hindustan Machine Tools. So do you see what was happening over here? Foreign companies have to give away their ownership, Indian companies cannot get more than 25% market share, and the government companies had terrible products. And because of this, three things happened. Number one, very selected exceptions of businesses could prosper, because of which job creation in the private sector was very slow. Number two, with the majority of the sectors heavily monitored or operated by the government itself could not scale up their business. So even they could not accelerate job creation. And lastly, because so many foreign companies left India, the Indian business ecosystem neither had competitors to push the level of the market, nor did the Indian companies have enough high quality jobs to create. But in the West, during the same time, the job opportunities were booming. So the IITians used all the resources from India and flew abroad to become taxpayers for the United States and the United Kingdom. And mind you guys, we cannot blame the IITians over here, because you tell me, in today's context, after studying very hard, if you become a specialist in blockchain, if there are no jobs available for a blockchain engineer in India, why would you waste your time in India when you can make $200,000 a year in the US? This was and still is the case with the IITians, whereby in spite of having very high skill, they do not find great job opportunities in India. Now, if you look at the cost of the situation to the Indian economy, it's absolutely ridiculous. The Indian government spent around 84,000 crores on education in FY21 alone. And when these students go out there and study abroad, as much as $17 billion per year is lost in government revenues, simply due to students studying abroad. So we pay the cost and the United States gets the tax. This is the first reason for India's first phase of brain drain, which is lack of opportunities. Now the question over here is, IITians keep leaving India, that is fine. But most of our friends are not IITians, right? Then why did they leave India? Well, this is what brings me to the second reason for India's brain drain, which is exclusive education. Let's take the IITs as an example. You see, over 10 lakh students give JEE mains every single year. But out of these students, only 17,300 students got seats in IITs as of 2023. That's a mere 1.73% of the applications. And even if you considered all great engineering institutes like NITs and BITS, barely 1 lakh students get into a decent engineering institute. So by default, apart from these 1 lakh students, the rest of the students are excluded from high quality education straight away. Now, had this been for a job, that would have been perfect, because then it is about a competition to find capable people. But if you see, the fundamental purpose of education itself is about making people capable and making people skilled. So by excluding the rest 9.5 lakhs plus students who genuinely want to learn engineering, by depriving them of great education, the education system is defeating the very purpose of its existence. So what happens to these 9.5 lakhs plus students every year? Well, they get into a B grade or a C grade engineering college where there is a super outdated syllabus, teachers with super outdated knowledge, and a pathetic infrastructure for education. And in spite of the primary purpose of the college being imparting skills, these bureaucratic professors obsess over two of the most useless attributes of engineering, which are marks and 75% attendance. As a result, the quality of engineering education in India has become so pathetic that even after 4 long years of education, 80% of our engineering students are unemployable. Now mind you, they are not unemployed but unemployable, which means even if there are a ton of job opportunities, our engineers do not even have the skill to qualify for the job. So what do these students do? Very simple. If they're rich, they give the GRE or GMAT exams, go to the US or UK, study there for another 2 years and become a capable engineer or a B school graduate. And then they spend the next 20 years in the US or UK as a well-paid tax citizen and as a super valuable engineering or management talent. And if they are poor, they struggle to get a job, remain unemployed in India, and eventually become a liability to the country. And this is not just applicable for engineers but even for doctors. Did you know a research published in Clinical Orthopedics and Related Research revealed that about 30% of the physicians in the National Health Services of England are of Indian descent? And while there is only one doctor for every 2,400 Indians, there is one Indian doctor in the US for every 1,325 Americans. Now mind you, I am not saying one doctor for every 1,325 Americans, but one Indian doctor for every 1,325 Americans. So do you see what's happening over here? India has become the perfect talent agent for America. So we train people in bulk, and whoever does well, they go to the US, they become an asset for them and they pay taxes over there. And whoever doesn't, they remain in India as a liability to us. So America gets our assets and we get the liability, which is why they say, Padega India, tabhi to badega America. So the moral of the story is that quality education in any country must not be exclusive, it must be inclusive. And anybody who has the will to study and acquire a skill must be given a fair chance at quality education. And this is not because of equality, justice, etc. It is because education is the most important catalyst for economic growth. Because if you remember from our Tamil Nadu case study, education is a merit freebie. As in, even if the government spends 80,000 rupees per student to give her world-class computer education, in just 4 years itself, when she starts making 7 to 10 lakhs per annum, she would become a tax-paying citizen who would pay taxes for the next 20 long years. Therefore, the government needs to allocate its resources to spread out quality education all across the country. But as of now, you will see that there is so much disparity in government spending that 26% of the government's higher education budget is spent on just IITs. That's a whooping 4,135 crores on just 13,300 students. So only 1.1% of the total students studying in government higher level institutes get the benefit of 26% of the government funding. In fact, from central government fund for higher education of 2018, the government spent more than 50% of its higher education fund on less than 3% of the students. So do you see the gap over here? The rest of the 97% of the students are deprived of government funding and opportunities, because of which an Indian talent prefers to leave India rather than struggle with both lack of education and lack of opportunity in India. And lastly, we have limited research and development opportunities. So many researchers and scientists are migrating to the West because they are provided with better infrastructure, better laboratories, and better equipments that are needed to conduct their study or research. And according to Business Today, the number of Indian scientists and engineers working in the US has increased by 85% between 2003 and 2013. Whereas here, India's spending on research and development is among the lowest in the world. As of recently, it was just 0.7% of our entire GDP. These are some of the most important reasons for the brain drain problem of India. So the question over here is, what do we do about it, and what are the recommended steps to be taken by the government and the businesses in India to fix this burning issue of brain drain? The first pillar of education that we need to build is something called Industry Academic Connect, and a classic example of the same is Apna College itself, which I told you about earlier. And when I spoke to Aman, he told me that they first do their research to find out which skills actually have value and will have value in the next 5 years, and then they decide to launch a particular course, and that's how they zeroed down on web development course. Similarly, the colleges must first do their research and find which skills are valuable and then decide upon the courses that they want to launch. But today, unfortunately, colleges and professors both have no idea about what kind of people and skills are needed in the market. Now, from the government standpoint, the government of India needs to study and publish a report that educates the Indians about the growing job markets all across the world. And every year, we need to find out how much skilled workforce is required and in which domains. For example, in case of engineering, the government needs to analyze whether the market really needs 10 lakh engineers or not. If yes, then we need to estimate how many computer science engineers we would need and how many civil engineers we would actually need in the market. And based on this study, the government needs to guide the colleges on the intake of students. So unless the government fixes this supply-demand mismatch, the messed up colleges in India will keep on making a ton of money and the nation will keep on bleeding. Secondly, Indian education must not be exclusive, it must be inclusive. And this means lowering the barrier to entry to education. For example, if there is a 12th standard kid in the country who wants to become a coder, by default, she must have access to world-class education. If she wants to become a stockbroker, she must have access to a world-class library of stock market lessons. And for this, we will need two barriers to be burnt down. Number one is the barrier of cost, and number two is the barrier to access. A classic example of this philosophy is a website called MIT.ocw. This is MIT's website where they have world-class study materials from some of the best professors for subjects like stock market, economics, entrepreneurship, and even history. They give you lectures, assignments, and even study materials to learn further. So by not closing the doors to a limited set of students, MIT is giving American students an access to a host of great courses so that they can get a taste of different domains and decide which one to specialize in. In India, if you see, Zerodha Varsity has done a great job to democratize trading knowledge for Indian students. So just like MIT and Varsity have brought down the barrier of access and cost to the students, the government of India needs to decrease the barrier of accessibility. And lastly, we need to invest very heavily into our research and development. In fact, according to a World Economic Forum report, there is a direct correlation between brain gain and talent retention capacity of a country and the percentage that it spends on research and development as a part of its GDP. For example, if you look at Israel is such a small country, guys. And you know what they did? The government of Israel, in spite of being at war with 5 of its neighbors, in spite of fighting 7 major wars in history, even while they were in the middle of the war, they had the audacity to invest in 2 things. Number 1, research and development, and number 2 was building an ecosystem for entrepreneurs. So they did not just use government money to fund these startups, but the government itself put in efforts to get investors from the US to give opportunities to Israeli scientists, engineers, and entrepreneurs. And the result? Well, some of the most incredible inventions came out from Israel, which then went on to become billion-dollar assets. For example, Mobileye was a company that created systems for self-driving cars, and it got sold to Intel for $15.3 billion. Similarly, M Systems was a USB drive company that got acquired by SanDisk for $1.6 billion. And Waze, which was a real-time traffic update app, they got acquired by Google for $1.3 billion. And not just that, matured Israeli companies even got listed on Nasdaq, where in total, today they have a market cap of $119 billion. So do you realize, for a war-torn country with such less population, this is an incredible achievement. This is the power of government's efforts into building an industry academic connect, which is why some of the biggest tech companies have their hubs in Israel. because they know for sure that Israel is a gold mine of great talent. This was the brief case study of the root cause, effect and solution to the brain drain in India. Now you tell me in the comments, what should India do to fix this problem? And by the way, if you're watching this episode, I just hope you would give India one more chance, try to stay over here and do something incredible for the country. That's all from my side for today, guys. If you learned something valuable, please make sure to hit the like button in order to make YouTube Baba happy. And for more such insightful business and political case studies, please subscribe to our channel. Thank you so much for watching. I will see you in the next one. Bye bye.